Thank you for tuning in again to Mastering Counseling. So glad to have our listeners back. And today we are super excited to have Matthew Morgan, who is the owner of Misfit Refuge, such a cool name, on the show with us. He is a licensed counselor who has his hands in many different areas with writing and working specifically with people who have neurodivergent needs. So welcome to the show today, Matthew.
Thank you, Becky. It's great to be here. I've been enjoying listening to all the great stuff that you bring to just the counseling world with this podcast. I love your range of topics. It just ticks my little neurodivergent brain too. So
Good. Well, that's good
yeah,
to hear. I'm glad you've enjoyed them. We've had a lot of, it's so funny how one kind of area of counseling is catching so many different conversations. It never feels like the same one. So that's good.
definitely.
Um, why don't you talk to us about, I thought maybe we'd set the stage for neurodivergent brains, because it is becoming more of a common term, but I do think there's a lot of people who maybe don't fully understand the term. So how about you tell us about what that means, and then we'll get into talking about your practice.
Absolutely. I appreciate that too. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of this area is that it is an evolving definition. It never really seems the same way twice. Like it as the years progress, the concept has changed with it. As of right now, I like Nancy Doyle came up with a just a really nice infographic that really kind of encompasses what neurodiversity is because it's a wide range of things. Typically, we've referred to it as maybe like somebody who's on the autism spectrum, but as time has progressed and as we started to understand brains better, that term has accompanied individuals with ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, even Tourette's syndrome has kind of worked its way in there as well. And it basically the concept right now is just anybody whose brain, if we remember back to our wonderful stats class, that was probably not the favorite class that I took, but the brains
Mhm.
that are outside of that standard mean of everybody else. We think differently. Um, Typically it encompasses like the thought processes. Sensory issues can be really
Mhm.
big with neurodivergent people. So people who have
Mhm.
sensory processing, either too much or too little. Social interactions are encompassed in this. So there are people who just they're learning language, they're learning behaviors, scripts on how to interact with people, and definitely the feeling capacity of things. So a lot of times your neurodiverse people can be either too much or too little on the empathy side. So the highly sensitive people feel everything. Then there's also the spectrum of people who are like, oh yeah, your dog died, sorry, and no emotion to
Right.
it, right? Like, because it's all calculated. And so really
Yeah.
I'm working around the definition, but I think that's as practitioners, I think that's kind of where we're at right now with this term.
No, that was great. Thank you for giving us all of that because it is so many different, people associated with certain diagnoses. And I work in a school and, we're starting to use the phrase more. Um, and it's just the more we know about it, the better, right? Because a lot of kids, the way school is set up, it is not conducive for the neurodivergent path. So anyway, I'm glad that you're
Definitely.
focusing on it. So let's talk about your practice and the name Misfit Refuge. I love the combination of those two words. And I have a lot of ideas as to why you named it that, but we would rather hear from you as to how it came about, where it started, and how you chose those words.
Definitely. So the Misfit Refuge really was something that evolved with as I started to understand myself more and as I started to practice, particularly in private practice. So the actual full switch over to Misfit Refuge has just happened for the counseling side of things. I've run a coaching business with that.
Hmm.
And I love it because there's this concept. I would say the defining moment for me, for those of us of a certain age, was the Rudolph Christmas special that we watched with the great stop animation, where they have this island of misfit toys. And there's all these toys that just don't belong. They don't work the right way, or they do different things, or the elf wants to be a dentist. And I gravitated to that misfit
Mm-hmm.
concept. Was like, I'm okay as I am. I just don't fit. And I need to
Mm-hmm.
find my fit. And the refuge became that place of everybody who struggles with this. We're all going to look different. We act different. We talk different. We have different needs. But the idea of this was just to kind of provide a place where people can come, process through their hurts, find healing, and hopefully in the process connect with other people of like mind who appreciate those differences in them.
All right, I like that. And let's I know one of your practices is focused, like you said, on counseling. And then I know you're doing some other work in writing and coaching. So why don't you just kind of share the difference between the two and how much you're working in each?
Right. My bread and butter is in the counseling practice. That is, it's the established business. And I actually have a new associate now who is also of the neurodivergent bend. We just
Mhm.
connected really well. So we joined forces and really
Awesome.
are working together. Um, I enjoy that, but part of my inner goal, my who I am, is that I need to be creative. I need to make things, work with
Hmm.
things. So the writing has really come in to that, the speaking. I'm currently working on a book on perfectionism and neurodivergence,
Mm.
particularly as it's framed within spirituality, because that's another big bend that I have.
Okay.
And so if there's a Venn diagram, just finding where those things all overlap, because that is a really a cause near and dear to my heart. And there may not be a whole lot that struggle with it, but I think there's enough that we
Hmm.
we can definitely find our people.
Yeah.
And so in that term, I provide coaching for individuals that maybe they don't need the full therapeutic um, treatment of things. They don't need to go back and talk about the injuries that parents gave them, or sometimes, no offense to schools, when we're trying to
Hmm.
fit, as you mentioned, we don't fit in real well. So
Hmm.
a lot of times we've gotten past that, but we just need some skills for life. And that's where I provide the coaching services of like,
Okay,
hey, let's
cool.
work on ways that we can structure your work environment to fit you.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think there'll be plenty of people who want to read about perfectionism and it can do a lot of great things, but it can really weigh people down and give them so much anxiety and pressure that is unneeded. So well, that'll be exciting. When do you think that will come out?
At my current speed, 2053 or 54. No, hopefully not that long. I'm wrapping up the first chapter. I've got all the research in for it. I'm plugging on that.
Okay.
My goal is by really within the next probably by summertime, be able to
Okay.
have that out there.
All right, awesome. Congrats. I believe in looking on your website and everything, you have a couple other books that are already published. Did you want to talk about those?
I'm happy to. They're a little bit older works.
Okay.
One's a speculative fiction novel that I wrote, just because I love that concept of let's twist reality a little bit, and I
Hmm.
also really like the good versus evil, the melodrama of like
Hmm.
let's work through this. It also incorporates individuals with disabilities. So my main
Hmm.
protagonist is hard of hearing,
Okay,
because that's a struggle that I have, and I thought it would be nice to actually have the deaf and hard of hearing community represented well in
that's
this.
amazing. Yeah.
Um, so I did that, and then also did a documentary with a gentleman who bicycled across the country, starting in
Mm.
Ohio and working all the way to San Francisco.
Wow.
However, he went via Connecticut, Florida, Utah. So
Oh,
it was
the
was
long
was a
route.
wonderful up down journey. But Mike and I got to sit down, and I virtually took the journey with him, because I do not want to do that one literally. But it was fun to work through his steps with him.
Yes, very cool. You mentioned being a little bit hard of hearing yourself and that a lot of the work in helping other people is from your own experience. Did you want to share a little bit more on the personal end of things of what brought you here? Or if we've already delved into that, that's fine. But I didn't know if you had more to share of your past.
I can, and I'd share it with people. Just again, that refuge concept of, we're not alone. And
Hmm.
even the person in the healing seat often has had to do a lot of healing of their own. And I've listened to a lot of your guests, and just a lot of people in the profession in general. I think we all have our inner monsters that we've had to work with, our inner struggles, and that informs us as clinicians.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my bigger one that I always go back to was that I actually started life in pastoral ministry. Went to
Okay.
Bible college, went to a school up in North Dakota, and we I fought through my 4 years of school. I actually had a fatal, not fatal, obviously, I'm still here, near fatal illness my senior year
Oh, wow.
that it was a huge struggle to get through. I got all the way through it, went to go get my ministry licensure. I passed my exam with flying colors, but I failed the Myers-Briggs test, which I didn't know you could actually do.
Wow.
Um,
I do
the
remember Myers-Briggs.
yes, I got there, and the individual in charge of things, he looked at me and he says, "Look, he goes, I don't think you have the right personality to be a pastor. You should find
Oh,
something else." And
wow.
it was my 20 something self that was just a door slamming in the face, and he didn't know what to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go and just do a lot of searching. I ended up in education,
That,
went from education into counseling, and really found my place there. But it was that rejection that really fueled things, as well as I also was working on a master's in divinity later to try to get
okay.
back in. And I found that theological people aren't always the kindest of people.
Unfortunately.
And so all of that fed into this story that I don't like. I'm broken. I'm no good. I'm worthless. I can't do this
Mm-hmm.
thing that I really wanted to do. And along the way, somewhere that transformed into recognizing that I am a neurodivergent soul, right? Like I don't fit in with people. I don't always react the same. I don't understand the same, but that doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
me less than.
For sure.
I don't have, not everybody in the profession has to be a lion. I can
Mm-hmm.
work with my own strengths, but that took me 20 years of a journey. And I look back and I'm like, oh, heck no, I don't want people to have to think that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not broken. You're just you. And we need to find a way to make the world fit you.
Right. Thank you for sharing your story. And as we've heard many times on here, a lot of times people have felt failure or had some trouble early on, and then it shifted them into a different role, and then here they are. So, um, yes, I'm always sorry for what people had to go through, but it's amazing where it brings them. So, thank you for sharing that. Um, Let's talk a little bit about your specific work with your clients and maybe some strategies or things that you're using and how that works virtually as well. I believe you work only online, correct?
Correct.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
let's talk about that angle of it.
Yeah. I started off, as most of us did, with community-based care, and I did home-based care. And I found that there was a joy in being in people's environments because
Mm-hmm.
it lets them be who they are. They're not having to, fit into an office environment. But I also found that was really taxing work. So in 2018, I opened up the practice as a virtual only business. I was told that it was unethical. Insurances aren't going to cover this.
And
Nobody
sorry,
wants
what
to.
what year did you say you opened that?
2018,
Oh, okay. I
right?
always love knowing that. Yeah.
And that's the perspective of this is then, and I finally gave up on that part of things. And in 2020, January of 2020 specifically, I opened my office.
Oh,
Um, March of 2020, obviously there was a minor event going on in the
right.
world. So
Right.
my office, for the glorious 2 months that I had it, I didn't even get my diploma on the wall, and I moved home. And I'm here in my basement, and that's where I've been working since.
Okay.
But working with neurodiverse people, the virtual environment can be it's a familiar place. A lot of people in the neurodivergent community, they're gamers, they're online, they like social media, they feed
Mm-hmm.
off of these things. And so my work gets to take me directly to them. And it can be a very familiar place. And it's also safe, so they can control their environment and still talk to me.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so from there we get to work on we just literally just I would like to sit down and work on their goals of,
Mhm.
what do you think your obstacles are? What do you see the problems being? And I'm very much a storyteller, obviously. So I put that into my therapy. I do a lot of narrative therapy
Mhm.
of, hey, you're the hero of the story. What's your objective? And then
Right.
how are we going to use your strengths to do this, right? You're not going to solve the problem the same way as everybody else.
Mhm.
Um, to that same extent, I actually do, I run a therapeutic Dungeons and Dragons group online.
Oh.
So we meet everything online, and it gives us that opportunity to almost take it out of the realm of reality, put it into this fantasy world. But then I get to look at somebody and say, hey, remember when your character did this really tough thing? Right? How did you do it? Or you remember when you had this great idea and you rolled a natural one and you
Mhm.
didn't do it, right? Like, okay,
Right.
how did that feel? What other ways did we work through this? So it all kind of wraps up together with this.
Right. No, I love the Dungeons and Dragons. That was the first episode we did on here. I don't know if you've gotten to
Hmm.
hear it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was so eye-opening for me. And you will be glad to hear. I have four kids, but the one that's in seventh grade, I'm a parent who still actually reads the newsletter each week, but they are starting a club for it. They have lots of clubs. And one is like a regular board game club, but they are adding this component for kids. So anyway, I think it's just always good to hear when new ideas are making their way. So
Absolutely. It's
yeah,
fantastic.
that's what came to my head when you said that. Let's talk about, you mentioned this briefly, a focus on spirituality and technology kind of connecting in your work. So let's explore that angle of your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're almost two different arms of things, but they do come together. So obviously the tech allows us to connect. It allows us to meet face to face with people and work through there. I can see people all across, in my case, it's Ohio and Florida as well.
Mhm.
Um, so it lets us connect with people who maybe would not normally be in large concentration in area.
Okay.
So it allows me, to be in the rural areas and things like that. The spirituality side really is a whole different wing, and I tell people if they want to address this in therapy, I'm more than happy to. I'll always open up the question because I want to know more about their spirituality,
Hmm.
what has brought them to certain places. Obviously, from my story, Christian ministry was a big thing, but also there was a lot of rejection and a lot of hurt, and it really
Hmm.
highlighted where I didn't fit in, and I've often referred to myself as the misfit sheep,
Hmm.
because it's like I don't fit in there, and it creates a sense of trauma or hurt or brokenness. And
Hmm.
when I can open that up in a therapy session and say, "Hey, tell me about the people that hurt you and how
Hmm.
this felt. I want to hold on to this story, and we want to work on how can we reframe this? How can we show that you are
Hmm.
really this wonderful person and that I believe God loves."
Hmm.
But sometimes they're not at that point. They just want to say, hey, like I don't want to deal with any of this stuff right now. And they want to know that that's a safe spot. And that's a safe spot with me as well.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I'm sorry for the rejection in church. I mean, obviously not from me, but that's a huge part of my life. And it's so sad when it should be a place that people are welcoming and kind and that
Absolutely.
people feel that way. So thank you for helping people to explore that and then giving them the time if they're not ready for sure. Um, you mentioned that you practice in Ohio and Florida, so both of those often decide elections. But besides that, how is it those two states? And maybe if there's anyone listening from those, any particulars you'd want them to share ethically or by law or licensing, anything like that.
Um, as far as maybe the difference of practicing in the particular state, is that
Possibly. And then I guess first question is, why is it Ohio and Florida for you?
well, Ohio it is my home for me.
Okay.
Born, raised. I had 4 years in North Dakota for college, moved back. We moved to Florida for 6 months to be with family down there. We ended up
Okay.
moving back. Everybody asked why. I don't
Yeah.
know, but we're here. Especially this time of year. We're recording, of course, in January, and
Yes.
so. But Ohio for me is it is home, and it's where I've kind of established. And
Okay.
um, there's a lot of variation here, and of course, when you look at election results are a great way to tell because our big three cities are always one way, everybody else is another way because we are this combination of urban and rural all on top of each other. And,
Mm-hmm.
even my city, there's this huge dichotomy of things. So
Okay.
you can find a lot of very diverse needs in there and meet those.
Mm-hmm.
I picked up Florida because it was the telehealth made it easier. And um, I also, because I have a base down there, I have family down there. It
Okay.
was nice to be able to provide services
Mm-hmm.
for people who wanted to reach out that way. And again,
Right.
because I'm a very niche area, it's nice to have that as an option.
For sure. Do you see yourself maybe expanding to other states with this very specific niche or no?
That's a great question, and I don't know. Every once in a while, I'll get somebody from like a neighboring state who will connect and say, "Hey, dude, can you work with me?" And unfortunately, because of the state licensure, um, I have to turn them down
Mm-hmm.
until we get this figured out. And the counseling compact, I think, has a great potential to unify these things, but leaving things up to bureaucracy isn't always my favorite
Mm-hmm.
thing to do.
Yeah.
So I'm
Mm-hmm.
on the fence. I'm not opposed to it, but there is a lot of time and effort. And a lot of these boards just don't, unfortunately, they don't play nicely with each other. I don't know that
Mm.
we're working on transitioning into this century of
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that we can see people really
Right.
anywhere and we can do it safely and we can do it ethically. It just needs I think, some time to catch up.
Okay. Yeah, I just said, I'm like, with it being such a specific thing, I could see that people reach out from all over, but it is a good reminder to our listeners, because we always want to be ethical. And with online, I think a lot of laws or what have you are broken easier because, you just don't think about it with being online. And, I can't even prove that you're actually in Ohio right now, just as well, you don't
Mhm.
know if I'm in Michigan. So, um, well, let's think about some of our listeners who are maybe going into this work and thinking of like programs of study and specifically if they were interested in helping neurodivergent clients. Do you have any advice for them or do you have any um, schools in mind that you feel maybe more apt to train them in a good way, or is it something that just develops over time in their practice?
Um, I am I am not always the most positive cheerleader when it comes to some of our master schools out there.
Hmm.
They do well for themselves. I will tongue in cheek often tell people that in 3+ years of master's work, I learned not to sleep with my clients and how to take notes.
Mm.
Ironically, the former has not been nearly as much of a problem as I think they thought that it would be. So um, it gives you a fantastic foundation for everything.
Hmm.
But this field, and I think we're talking, this field is constantly changing. The information is moving quicker now. We're seeing
Hmm.
a lot more continuing ed opportunities. I've
Yeah.
looked even at getting a doctorate at this point, just because I have enough people who accidentally call me Dr. Morgan, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really good. But uh, in our field, the terminal degree doesn't pay out as much or doesn't benefit as much, I think, as our individual studies. And I think that's for people that want to go into this, that would be my recommendation is you have your core classes that you do, but niche into something that you are passionate about. I mean, I think there's definitely room for it in this.
Hmm.
So there's starting to be a lot of really good trainings, informational trainings, um, but listening to people. The thing with neurodivergence, I tell people, and it's an old expression, but and they used it for autism. But once you know one kid with autism, you know one kid with autism,
Mhm.
because all of us are flavored differently.
Right.
And you can't prepare for everything. So a lot of times just saying, hey, this is the big framework that I'm working around.
Mhm.
And learning how to ask those questions and learning how to listen and be a student. I think one of the biggest keys that I tell people is just to be vulnerable. Um,
Mm.
I grew up on the cusp of therapy of like you don't share anything, right? You're the blank
Mhm.
slate. And I think back to the videos of Fritz Perls, who's sitting back in his reclining chair, just smoking a cigarette, and just
Mhm.
listen to people, just complete blank. And
Right.
my neurodivergent people are like, no, that would not work for me, right? They
Mm.
want that back and forth. They need to model. They need that vulnerability. They need to know that we're human. So
Mhm.
that's the other thing that you don't learn in a class. You learn it through talking to people and, more importantly, listening to people.
Right. When you were talking about, a therapist sitting there, smoking and just staring blankly, um, and then we mentioned before how many neurodivergent people are very sensory. Do you find that, even though you're online, do you have them bring tools, not like building tools, but, Legos, or if they were younger, do you bring sensory items or have them purchased as part of your work while you are talking with them?
Um, if it's appropriate, absolutely. If they need to fidget, I think
Hmm.
it's so important. And you said Lego if they're younger, but quite frankly, I have quite a few Lego sets here in my background.
Yeah,
Uh,
sorry.
they are, and that's the fun. There's this curve with I think neurodivergent people do it in general, but I think neurotypical people do too, where we have this maturity peak. We want to appear a certain way, and then as we get older, we realize that some of these systems don't work, so we start to let go of it. I have fun. I embrace my next childhood here. Um, but fidgets, I think, are almost a must for most people. I've got
Mm,
my lacrosse ball that I
mm,
have here. I always have different items on my desk that I use myself.
mhm,
My oh, it's not going to come in. Spinning hammer. All those things
mm.
are important.
Yeah.
Um, More importantly is again listening to our bodies. So not everybody's a fidgeter, but what I find is after sitting talking to people for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I'll start to see them and they're moving and they're adjusting. And I'm like,
Gotcha.
do you need to get up and move? Like, can
Right.
I do that? Absolutely. Like
Right.
like you can pick it up if you want to pick up the camera and go for a walk, we can. If you just need to move around the room for a minute, take a lap,
Hmm.
because I think so many times, especially with neurodivergent, we tend to get tightened in our own body and turned into our own body. And I'm a big fan of somatic work of if we want to change our disposition, we need to change our position, right?
Hmm.
Like get up, take that stretch. Doing this interview, I'm at my standing desk
I was
because the
thinking, yes, you're
energy,
standing.
the energy is so much different for me than when I'm sitting back in a chair.
Yeah,
I don't do every client that way, but um, with neurodivergent people in particular, it's important to be tuned into the individual and their needs.
for sure. Yeah, it's funny, sitting on here listening, and I always sit, but my husband uses a standing desk, and um it's funny, like once in a while, if I'm really tired, I'll be like, I have to have something nearby to keep me engaged. Not that anyone's ever boring, but it's like when you're just sitting still, and that's about the only time I do it because I'm usually on the go so much. It's funny how it will make your body go into like a sedentary mode. So I hear that for sure. Um, all right. Well, we've covered a lot of great things today. Is there anything else that you feel like you'd want our listeners to know? I did want to ask a little bit on the business end. Do you manage all of your accounts and calendar, or do you have assistance for that? How is that working for you at this point in your career?
It depends on the minute. I have tried different things. Neurodivergent, try different
Right.
things. Always be,
Practicing.
always try that. I've had a builder that I've worked with, and they've done a fantastic job. But as I've gotten my hands on more things, I've actually, with the new year, I just brought all of that back in-house.
Okay.
So I do have an associate right now she's newly licensed. So she's working on filling up her caseload. So one of the things I've done is I'll have her do a lot of the administrative work because I think it learns the process. It also helps her obviously keep financially a little bit, get a little more money her way. So
Yeah.
she actually does a lot of my callbacks of things. Just
Okay.
full disclosure, one of the things I hate most in the world is the phone. It's talking on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it- I have scripts, I have ways that I can do this, but I just don't like to. So
Yeah.
it's much easier for me to turf it over to Anna and say, hey, would you set these appointments or would you follow up with this?
Right.
It also minimizes the shifting too, which I have found that even as I can do these things, but if I don't spend the energy doing those, now I can spend it being creative. I can spend it writing. I can spend it,
Right.
working on notes, or if I get really radical, even taking a bathroom break in the middle of the day, instead of rushing from appointment to appointment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's good to know. And it's interesting that you brought it back, but now you have someone to help who helps you. And yeah, I love there's a lot of things we all can do, but really is it the best use of our time because, there's only so many minutes in the day. So yes, thank you for bringing that approach. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers a lot of the things. I do have to ask about behind you because there's a lot of fun. So just talk to us about, are those only on display? Are they items you use a lot or and I feel like I'm seeing lighting right behind you as
There,
part of it.
there's the lighting because I want to keep the ambiance where
Gotcha.
it needs to be. Otherwise, things get really dark. I am in my basement.
Okay.
And I found the first part of the pandemic, everything was really dark and dingy, and I found
Mm-hmm.
my mood was just tanking. So
Uh-huh.
one of the things I really worked at was carving this space out so that clients can see it. And there's a variety of things. And what I love is, again, especially working with neurodiverse people, is often they have geeky interests or things they really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this behind me, a lot of it's strategic to notice, like, oh, like you have this fandom, I have this fandom, let's connect about it.
Right.
Um, or they'll tell me like, hey, did you see this anime is typically the one where I fall short on. Did you see this
Mm,
anime? I'm like, no, I didn't. Tell me about it though. I want to know more about it.
right.
Um, so yes, behind me, and most of this wing is Star Wars because I am a huge Star Wars nut.
Okay.
All of the expanded stuff, my son and I share that as an interest, and it's fun, and
Okay.
there's good therapeutic themes within it.
Right. Right.
So yeah, and so mostly display, but I will, like, when somebody sees it, I might roll back there and say, hey, tell me about this or talk about this,
Right.
and show me what you got too.
Right. Right. All right. Well, I'm glad I asked about that. I've been meaning to, and so
Mhm.
I'm glad you explained. All right. Well, thank you, Matthew, for being on the show with us. You can be looking ahead for his new book, hopefully coming out in summer. And thank you just for this special niche and how it's been part of your personal story and now how you are sharing it with your clients. So thank you for giving us your time today.
You are welcome, Becky. Thank you so much for all that you're doing for this. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you are enjoying all the various types of therapists and counselors that we're talking to. They each bring a special part of the program. And please continue to share on social media. Tell us what you'd like to know more about and have a wonderful day. Thanks.